Hi, 3DMJers. This is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, just wanted to remind everyone to head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and sign up for our Big 3 newsletter. We call it this because, in case you haven't noticed, our team comes up with 3 new pieces of content every week in the form of 2 articles and 1 podcast episode. Rather than remembering to check back with us 3 times a week, we can send it all to you in one single email every Thursday. This weekly digest also includes direct links to any other content that Team 3DMJ coaches are a part of throughout the entirety of the internet. Whether that's guest appearances, interviews, seminars, or courses, you will not miss any of it. So if you like hearing about all the free resources that we have to offer, all the products we sell, all the projects we are a part of, and all the ways you can get discounts, reminders, and early access to them, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com right now and sign up. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. Today, I'm talking to Brad Loomis and Jeff Alberts about the first 5 years of a bodybuilding career. One of the recurring issues we see with new competitors is their lack of the long game. Their urgency and excitement usually backfires and has them overthinking and over-expecting what they can and will get from the sport. In this episode, we talk about this skewed reality and exactly how patient we think someone needs to be in order to fully develop the foundations of a career as a bodybuilder. There are certain phases that everyone must go through, and we hope this discussion helps a lot of listeners figure this out for themselves or their athletes. As usual, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and leave it for us under podcast number 55. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Here's the first 5 years of bodybuilding with Brad Loomis and Jeff Alberts. So we were in Melbourne, and Berto did his usual good spiel about how to periodize your off season, or how to have the most useful off season that you can, how to use every part of your year to become a better bodybuilder. Right, and from what I understand, you guys were roommates. I knew that part, but from what I understand, y'all had this conversation when y'all got back home that night. And y'all were like, "This should be a podcast." And like, why did you think that, Brad? What about it spurred?
Yeah, I don't really remember what exactly spurred it, but we were just like, bouncing the ideas off each other's and kind of how we started and how we see, so many of our clients and followers and whatnot, how they get started. And, I think the bottom line is that, so many times people treat bodybuilding preps like, either a real quick 12-week get myself into shape, type of a mindset, or, they kind of treat things in phases, of, okay, this is a bulking phase, and, this is a cutting phase, and this is a maintenance phase instead of a continuum. And it just prompted a lot of conversation that we're like, this could be a podcast, let's do something along the lines of, not phases, it's a lifestyle, like we were saying, a continuum. And, sometimes they take years, and, it's not, how many sports can you just treat it like a 12-month get in shape, crash course, and people do that. It's like, I'm going to go ahead and do a show,
Yeah.
About that. How many years did you do gymnastics and just trained like every day before you did a meet,
Yeah.
And, it just prompted a lot of conversation on how folks should look at the sport more like a real sport and not a 12-week crash course on bulking, cutting, etc.
Yeah, and not that the phases are bad and everything needs a label, right? But the problem, or not the problem, I guess when you're looking at it in only phases and like these phases don't relate to each other, I guess would be the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff. What else did Brad miss? Kind of, not that he missed anything, but like,
no, he didn't miss it.
Off of
but
that,
I think to build off of it, I think that it's kind of like it's kind of like once you go through the process of, like, to be a really good bodybuilder, in my opinion, you have to go through all phases a couple of times. It's almost like, think of it like high school, your freshman year, sophomore year, junior, senior, off to college and so on. Every time you go through each phase, you learn more, not only about how to run good protocols, like, eventually, the first time out, you're going to be like, okay, these protocols are maybe iffy at times, but you build on that. Like the next time you get into that phase, the next time around, you get better with learning better protocols, but learning how to adjust them, and also learning the behaviors, because we have to talk about not just protocols. Like everybody thinks, okay, my macros, my cardio, my training, but the behavior aspect of it as well, like how you structure your day, how does, the training itself ties into your current environment, your current lifestyle. That changes, as you go through phases. Right. So it's like every time you circle back around, you get a little bit better and a little bit better. So it's like you go from one phase, like off season. Let's say you're a competitive bodybuilder, you go off season to prep back to off season back to prep. And, once you go through it like 2-3 times, that's when you start to really figure protocols out, but yourself out within the sport.
Yeah, for sure. And I like what you said about, Brad, and you're like, if we treated it like other sports. Because if you think about it, or at least this is my observation, right? When someone does their first powerlifting meet, not a power builder, but literally like, I want to be a powerlifter. Most people get really excited for their first meet, but they very well know this is the first of many meets. If you take like, again, I train at a CrossFit gym, and they have competitions like every couple months, and they're all like, all the coaches and all the members do them, and like it's this thing we do together. Same with 5Ks, same with softball, same like you said when I was in gymnastics. Like my first meet was terrifying. I was 7, but obviously I knew it was the first of many, and they're gonna all get better, and I'm gonna learn how to compete. All of that versus like everyone I feel like that we get new in this sport is like, this show is my life, and it's everything, and it's going to fix everything, and I'm going to get the right coach, therefore everything is going to work out perfectly. I'm going to get lean enough. I'm going to have the follower. Like everything they feel like is just like, again, this is just kind of how I observe it. Y'all can tell me if y'all see something similar, but it's like on this such a big pedestal compared to the way every other sport views their first like basketball game. You know?
That's it. It's like, I remember like back in 2002, and I was, you could kind of say I was a veteran, but still with that mentality of like, this one show in 2002, Texas Shredder, I always refer back to that season.
Yeah.
I wanted that pro card so bad. It was like do or die. Not once did I ever think about, I'm only 31 years old. I probably have another 10, 15, 20 years in the sport. I probably have a ton of shows after.
Yeah.
But it was so fixated just on that one, like, tiny little aspect of my journey. Yeah. And it was do or die. And I remember because I didn't get the pro card, I was devastated, and I was like, crying about it basically, and depressed, and wanted to quit the sport. And it was just like, there's more to just one show. That was just like, if I was to go back in time, I would have totally changed that mindset. I probably would have learned more about the process and more about myself, because I would have been more open-minded instead of so closed in. And I just had an athlete this past weekend, very first show. Definitely a gifted kid, but like 23-year-old kid, hella hard worker. And I remember when we first started, it was okay, you're going to need to lose a good 40 to 50 pounds. This is going to be a long process. And it was like 10 months later. Goes to his first show, the IMBF Hercules in New York, heavyweight division, walks away with that title. And he came in, I think, 3rd in the overall. So they gave out the top 2, got a pro card. So he just missed the pro card on the very first show.
Yeah.
And you would think this kid would be like, first show, win in the heavyweight class, almost a pro card, have a big ego. But basically, he's like, Jeff, even if because he was going to come to the Mayhem in SAC, but just life didn't work out for him, so we had to put it on hold. But basically, his response was, this couldn't have worked out any better. This is awesome. Even if I would have gotten the pro card, I know I'm not elite level caliber. I'm not going to do anything on the pro stage. I still need time to develop. So
that's awesome.
To me, it's like he's way ahead of schedule as far as maturity level, but he understands that it wasn't just about that one show or one season. There's a lot of career left ahead of him, and that was just one. That's just the beginning of his journey.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm kind of talking about, is that maturity level you have to have when you're going through these phases, to know that what you're doing now is going to better yourself for the next time around, like the next go around.
Yeah.
So it was really refreshing to me to see like someone so young kind of ahead of the curve with that.
Yeah. And what's to the audience, I guess, hearing me on all these podcasts, like talking about these things, I haven't competed in that mindset yet. Like I can't wait till I'm like 5 years from now getting ready for stage, and I have to go back and listen to all these things to be like, remember you said, because I've never done that. Like I had that one, I was also one person away from, like, top 2 went and I got 3rd in my first show. It was an NPC show, and then the next season I was with Berto, and granted it was way healthier, like leaps and bounds, but I still, it felt so life and death. And I did 3 shows that season, and I wasn't even half relaxed till the 3rd. So that was like 4 years of being a figure athlete, 3.5 maybe, because there was that year in between and like a few months before the first one that it took me until that last one to be like, this isn't that big a deal. But it feels so big. And I know that doesn't help. And that's because I did compete in gymnastics for like a bazillion years. It's hard because it's so, when we say it's funny how we treat it so different than other sports, but I think it's way harder too because it takes you so long to even get on that stage that first time. Again, like if one of my friends was like, hey, I'm doing a basketball tournament this weekend, do you want to go? I'd be like, all right. Same with the power. I could technically do a powerlifting meet next weekend and like it'd be okay, but I can't do that with a bodybuilding show. And I think that's why it feels so different and feels so important, I guess.
There's a lot of energy, daily energy going into it for a long period of time to get yourself on stage. So I totally understand how it's like that mentality of like, okay, this is do or die here.
Yeah.
But it's not like we like this kid we prepped for 10 months. It was, it wasn't about, hey, let's just get up there and see how we do. It was, hey, let's, when we're there, we're going to be as competitive as we can. So the prep had a lot of intent behind it. So it was serious.
Yeah.
But through the process, it was also, about post-show. So now that we're transitioning into the off season now, it's all new territory for him because this is the very first show. Now he's transitioning to the off season. So basically I responded him to a 26-minute response video.
Yeah.
Kind of like, going over, what transpired with the show and all that, but really kind of setting him up for that transition, kind of what to expect and what his potential is, and setting up not just like there's expectations for the season, for the show, but also now expectations after, because now we've gone through a whole season, we've gone through a show, we know what his potential is. So now we set up new expectations that are still realistic, but a step above from where he was. So again, it's like going into the next phase. It's all new territory. Go through the process, learn it. Now you're going to be going into another prep. Now you got that experience behind you. So it gets better and better as you go. So it's just like when you first start out, or even myself, 30 shows in, it's still like every single time I'm learning new things to apply towards the next one based off of past history.
Yeah.
And you've kind of, in my opinion, Jeff, you've kind of classified, if we kind of think about our continuum in 2 different athletes, your gentleman, first timer, he's done his first time, so he's been training for a long time. He's kind of gotten like half of that continuum, and we could kind of classify folks who are doing their first show or going to be doing their show or have never competed before. And then we've got a second classification, which now your gentleman is you've got returning athletes and how they're going to have to go through that, continuum of different phases and et cetera, et cetera. And I think a big question I just have to ask you is, what kind of time, energy, effort, what did his life leading up to that first prep kind of look like?
During the prep?
Before he prepped.
Not during the prep.
Before
like
dieting.
Way before. Like before that very first day when he started bodybuilding prep.
He was kind of similar to what he's doing now. He's in retail. So he's like open right now. He's opening up another store. So he's a young guy, but a go-getter. So his life outside the gym is kind of like fast-paced. He's a go-getter. So, but I mean, the maturity level is the way he handles things is extremely good, awesome, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of rare that you get someone who could handle things in and out of the gym with a prep first timer that young like he does. So he's not that he's an outlier, because I think there's a lot of people that are capable of doing it. But yeah, he's definitely a busy guy.
Yeah, I feel like, is he not ex-military, or am I crazy?
No.
Okay. I read the wrong IG profile, my bad.
How about training wise? I mean, doing bodybuilding type training, what did that look like in I guess just the phases of bulking and cutting, etc.?
Basically, a little bit of strength. Yeah, usually it's like the compounds, but a lot of hypertrophy. So the first movement of each workout, typically a strength movement, and then after that, like hypertrophy. Moderate 8 to 12s on the rep ranges, sometimes up to 15 on certain movements. Deload every 4th week, 4-day splits, sometimes a 5-day split, kind of depending on how he's recovering, how the the stress out of the gym was going. So it's 4 and 5 day splits basically the whole way through. Not crazy volume, average of 3 to 4 sets per movement. So it was just basically we just regulated that depending on how he's recovering and feeling.
Did he do coaching with you prior to his prep?
No, he didn't. So when he came, it was like that initial conversation that we had was basically, hey, I want to prep, and it was like the timeline I don't think was realistic. And I remember the conversation like, we're going to need this much time, like a lot longer time than he anticipated, I think. But he was very open to that. So it was like more along the lines of an open-ended prep. The actual target was Mayhem next month.
Okay.
But we did the Hercules. We thought we could be ready for it, so we did it. And after he did it, then work and stuff outside, which is awesome because he's under a lot of stress right now. And to me, I think it takes a lot more courage, and it's more inspiring when someone knows that life priorities should take precedence over a show. Mm-hmm. So he's like, you know what, I could, this is just one stop. This is the first stop. There's going to be a lot more to come. So he's like, I'm okay with just doing one show.
Yeah.
I think he was a little bit worried about if I was going to let me down because our original goal was me. I'm like, no, you're not letting me down at all, man. I'm super proud of you. You exceeded expectations.
Yeah.
A lot of years of training, Jeff? Did he have a lot of years under his belt?
I can't recall exactly how many training years, but he got a decent amount of muscle on him, as you guys have seen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and that's but that's the thing though, right? Is it's not like we see sometimes where even if they are comfortable saying, oh, okay, I need a 10-month prep, that's longer than I thought. But sometimes we get people that really haven't been lifting that want to do a show.
Yeah.
And that
a lot.
That's scary. It's
that's common.
I don't want to say scary, but it's like it kind of freaks me out how common that is. Yeah. That they're like, I want to look awesome, so I'm going to do a bodybuilding prep. And it's like a bodybuilding prep is fat loss. The problem is we got nothing under your fat, Yeah.
And that scares me as a coach. I mean, I'm sure it does you too, Andrea, because you and I are, kind of similar in that approach. But when people, when they're first timers, when they look at a prep as a 12, 15, 20 week, I'm going to get in shape program, it scares me because we have to be realistic and transparent to that person. And basically say, you have not even done any really training of any sort to build your physique to begin with.
Right.
And I don't want to burst your bubble, but you're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment and for, in your own mind, failure. And that's I think that kills a lot of bodybuilding careers before they even really get rolling. And why I think that the continuum mindset of nice chunks of plans really benefits.
Especially if you're relatively newer to, let's say, tracking macros or really kind of having a set structure. And so you're like, okay, I'm gonna prep, but I don't have any experience with any of these tools like tracking macros or having a structured training program. So you're basically jumping into a fire without having that background experience. You're just now you're all of a sudden you're in this prep, you have little experience. Now you have to learn all these tools while you're prepping. It's already stressful enough you're prepping when you do know these tools. But it gets really amplified. So my thought is, hey, let's like Brad was saying, if maybe you need more muscle, get on a structure to go towards building muscle. You could still learn how to track, still learn these tools without all that stress of being in a deficit. And that's kind of what Berto was talking about. Hey, you're like, if you're in this gaining phase, you're learning a lot of tools and you're learning all these behaviors that will carry over to when you do go to prep. So when you transition to prep, it becomes a little less stressful because you have that experience behind you.
Yeah.
And we talk big picture too. I mean, the conversation we have with people with that much muscle, I mean, you could look at it two ways. One, let's say they do prep, even though there's not a lot of muscle there. I'd rather guide someone with that's so fixated on prepping. That way, that at least they get some good experienced coach that will help them go through. They will learn prep. They will learn how to, eventually once it's done, they gain that knowledge and experience that will carry over later on. But after that prep's over, you better spend some time putting on some muscle.
Yeah.
So there's you can look at it two ways, and it just depends on the individual. But I really do encourage people that if they're relatively new and they don't have a lot of training experience, let's build first.
Yeah.
And learn behaviors without the deficit.
I have.
And learn.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, in addition to that, learn about the training continuum. Don't think about a week of training, because a lot of times when people do come to us, they say, okay, well, what am I going to do on Monday? And what am I going to do on Tuesday? We got to think beyond that. We got to think beyond what's going to happen Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, week one. We got to think about, okay, this is month one, this is month two, this is this 3 months, this is that. They're almost like quarterly. And a lot of times I don't think people even think that far ahead. And it's like, if it's going to take you 12, 15, 20 weeks, to do a bodybuilding prep, we need to think about 12, 15 weeks of training and how that's going to be organized.
Yeah, for sure.
What are you going to say, Andrea?
No, I was going to say I have a surprising, again, I don't know if it's surprising to everybody, but it's surprising to me because I'm the newest coach, I guess, that on my roster that first year and a half, a surprising number of people that they frequent the gym, right, and have dieted on their own before maybe, but they want a prep. We don't have a whole lot of muscle yet, even though they go to the gym all the time. They might have, because they were trying to live this lifestyle, been underfed for the last year and a half or something, right? And they want to prep. So I'm like, okay, we can lose this fat. But the whole time that we're spending those 6 months to a year, I'm just chomping at the bit because I'm like, when we have an off season, this is going to be good,
Right.
And I try to convince them to get that, and they hopefully, get more excited about what's after this prep, because it's your first one.
Sure.
You're going to have that experience under your belt. We might not get as lean as we wanted because we'll just be smaller, and we're not that big to begin with, but you'll know what it's like. And then this off season is just this first big opportunity of growth, because they don't train, they don't eat enough or train intelligently and patiently enough until we start our prep, and it's like, shit, but could you imagine if we did that before,
exactly.
And so I think I'm always vocalizing to these athletes, but just wait till after, wait till 5 years from now, what's going to happen, and that kind of sucks, because I've been there too. I think I was halfway through my 2013 prep, and I was like, I just don't have the muscle I want but I'm like halfway here. So like, all right, let's keep going. But I knew it wasn't good enough. Yeah, I knew it. Not good enough. Like, it's not anyone's like fault per se, but it was definitely, I still had like at least a couple months before my show, and I was like, I don't have the muscle I thought I did. But I knew I wanted to see it through, and the hardest part / most rewarding part has been the 3 years since.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you had that eye-opening experience that I've had a lot of clients who are doing a prep and have kind of committed and signed up for a show, and all of a sudden their eyes are open and they're like, oh, this is what I've been missing.
Oh, eating. Yeah.
You know,
in my case.
Training and blocks and things like that. And then by that time, it's like you were. They've already laid in bed, you know, and we have to kind of follow through with it, you know, unless you're just going to give up the fees for the show or, you know,
no, because I think, yeah, I think one thing I did learn about gymnastics, or learned while in gymnastics, is I do know that, all right, I'm not going to be, you know, kicking it, although I placed really well. Like, I'm not going to be what I envision as this figure athlete I could be. And so, but I'm halfway here, and like, I know that there's other things I'm learning through this process. And to be honest, I was looking forward to powerlifting and eating, not eating like because I'm so hungry, but like being like, I didn't realize till halfway through prep that I wasn't eating enough the last 2 years before prep. And so I was like, shit, all right, we'll ride this out. But I know that the more useful thing will be like the next couple years. And it took me probably, I was going to say the next couple years will be useful, but it didn't even click till probably the last year of my life. So like, it took me a while. And you guys saw it in Melbourne. Y'all were like, oh shit, you finally grew. I was like, yeah, I'm eating now.
Yeah,
but that was a long
training and eating, and staying away from deficit, and there you go.
Yeah, but it took a long time.
That's kind of that second, you know, category that we're talking about is, you know, athletes who have done shows and are trying to string together, you know, show to show, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, 1 year apart, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
That's kind of our second classification of that continuum.
And now that you put it that way, I think honestly, it was detaching my string that made it easier. Because as soon as I finished 2013, I was like, I'm going to eat, and then in 2015, it's going to be awesome. And I honestly didn't even start eating till 2016. Or like the end of 2015. You know what I mean? When I decided I'm actually not competing for at least 3 years. Because I just didn't, I just never saw myself looking very different. And I was getting stronger, but I still didn't.
What's kind of interesting, like if I go back to like when I was in my 20s, like way back in that era, it wasn't about, okay, do a prep, do a show, I need to reverse diet, it was none of that. It was it was weird. Once the show was over, like that next day, let's start bulking and let's start working towards the next. It was almost like we didn't give a shit about having these abs. We didn't give a shit about having glutes, 4 months later. It was get in there and train hard. And I'm not saying everybody go out there and get fat, but what I'm saying is that mentality was more about, okay, this show's over. We are already like on to the next and on to the off season to get better for the next one. I remember that. It was just like, let's get in there and do that. That was like the norm. Like seemed that way anyways.
Yeah.
But nowadays, like the last few years, it's all about trying to be overly analytical and technical, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to make sure I have my glutes 4 months later, 3 months later. What the fuck is that going to do? How are you going to lift? Your leverages are going to suck. You're not going to be able to perform better like that. So to me, it's almost like I had it right in a way back then, but just the science and the protocols weren't there for me.
Yeah.
But it was like the mindset I was already like, it was kind of like we're trying to say here was like, let's move on, let's get better. Let's move on, let's get better. And as you go through each phase, you start getting better and better, like we're talking about.
Yeah.
And you still considered yourself a bodybuilder. It wasn't like the next day you were no longer a bodybuilder, you know? It was part of the bodybuilding process.
Yeah.
It was the process. So, okay, now you got to bulk. You got to bulk to get bigger.
Yeah.
And back then it was like, I wasn't around too many natural bodybuilders. It was more like, okay, fall and flex mags FBB, and basically it was like, okay, we got to bulk hard, get big, gain muscle.
Yeah.
But after my 2014 prep, I struggled because I tried to maintain that. Okay, let me try to maintain body weight. So it was almost like I was staying in like this prep mode, like not allowing myself to get out of it. And I was just stuck at 10 pounds over, thinking, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do because I'm an older bodybuilder now. I need to stay closer to stage weight. But I was struck, like the behaviors, like I was trying to keep those same behaviors in prep. 50 weeks of basically being, sacrificing a lot of life stuff and things. So all of a sudden you come out of the prep. Now I'm trying to maintain those behaviors and trying to stay 10 over. It just didn't make sense at all. So it was like, and because I was trying hard to stay, like keep that kind of phase going, that once I decided that, okay, I do need to gain weight, then I let go because I was so handcuffed so long. Then I went from like 10 over to like 30 over like that.
Yeah. It made me think about the reasons why I didn't eat weren't, it wasn't like, oh, I want to be shredded, da, da, da. It was like I was 115 to 20 pounds. And in my brain, like 130 to 135, that should have been the cap of like what an off-season figure athlete should have gained when my stage weight was at. And I've been 145 for like 2.5 years, and the 145 just keeps looking better. But the ceiling was like, mentally, if you're a competitor, you don't get that far from stage weight. You don't get that far. And I thought I was being a responsible athlete that whole time, but again, I just never would look that different. I would never look that different.
You needed to allow yourself to get a bit heavier and to eat a little bit more so you can reap the rewards from your training. It's kind of a double-edged sword because some people like myself need to be a bit heavier, maybe you, but other people, I mean, obviously not so much. So it's kind of like very individual.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, like as coaches or, leaders in the industry, we put these guidelines out there, but everybody, we have to remember that that's all they are is guidelines.
Yeah.
So you have to understand. That's why, like me and Brad were talking about in the hotel room, was like, once you go through these phases multiple times, then those guidelines become less and less for yourself. You start finding your own guidelines for yourself individually.
That's a good point.
And that's where I'm at now, like 30 years later. It's like I don't follow, like I don't look externally too much for answers. It's like, okay, I got all these years. I've been through this process so many times, and I'm still like figuring shit out. Like right now I can say that because I don't know if I'm going to compete this year, to be honest. I haven't really said much.
Okay.
They canceled the Minnesota Mayhem, the pro division. So now I'm like, okay, where am I going to compete? Financially, I just don't know if I can even afford it with family stuff going on right now. I have, but I haven't stopped prepping. I'm still prepping, and I'm going to keep it going because I have really good behaviors. I'm still kind of enjoying life at the same time. It's like it's the best I've ever done in this regard for balancing out. So even if I don't compete this year, if I maintain the same behaviors and the same phase that I'm in now and just carry it over, then I can easily do spring shows without it really being overly stressful at all.
Right. And
So I was just going to say, I'm just still continuing to learn like my continuum of how to kind of keep this sport going and sustain it, at the same time enjoy the sport, but at the same time enjoy life and trying to balance it all. Because I want to last 35, 40 years. Sorry.
It's okay. No, can I go, Brad? Is that okay?
Yeah.
I was going to say what he made me think of was how having those standards, I thought like a figure shouldn't get much heavier than this, right? But then also at the same time, that whole like 115 pound physique, like that shouldn't be my goal anymore, but I kept seeing things as like, this is so far from 115 pounds. What it's like, well, if I want to be a female bodybuilder, or at least a full figure athlete, I shouldn't be comparing that tiny stage weight to like what maybe my frame could hold if I allowed these things to happen. So that's like one of the few times where knowing the history of myself like put me in a prison where it's like I probably shouldn't have been there. I can do better than that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say this. Let's say you got the weight you're at now. Let's say it didn't look good.
Yeah, that'd be
Well,
different.
okay, it doesn't look good. Okay, now you know, right?
That's
you just
true.
learned, okay, now I know. Okay, now I could correct this. And now when I get back into this phase where I initially started from, again, you know, okay, don't let myself get to 145.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and two, you know, you guys both brought up really good points that I never even really thought about. Is Andrea, you finally let go of the number, and because I think I, like you, focused a lot of times on a number, a weight, so far from stage weight, or a picture in our mind of we need to have abs, or we need to have this, or we need to have that, and I think both of us have kind of released ourselves from that prison, and kind of focused more on behaviors. Instead of, you know, we're focused on our sport as far as defined as behaviors and not a number or a picture. You know what I mean? Because even like Jeff just said,
is that what you
well,
think about?
I know in the past when I was not, because like you were saying that you were more so focused on number. To be a responsible athlete, you needed to be so far away from stage weight. You need to be 135. You know, you wanted to be 40, and that was not working for you. And once you let go of that number and kind of more focused on behaviors as training as an athlete, feeding yourself as an athlete, it seems like you kind of let yourself out of that prison in a way.
I can't take a lot of credit for that. It was more.
Well, I know. Yeah.
No, it was more, because I found this sport in grid that I wanted so bad, and the training was so damn hard, especially at first, that I was like, when I was just so hungry all the time, that I was like, fuck it. So I don't think I could have, honestly, if I would have stayed in like powerlifting or just bodybuilding, I don't know if I could have done that. It was like this little just hack that kind of just in particular worked for me. Because when I started grid, I went from like 138 to like 152 within the first like 2 or 3 months, and I didn't give a shit. And then it leveled back out to like this 145 to 148 kind of range. But I had to care about something else more.
Exactly. Those behaviors go along with grid, your training and stuff. And
I guess I just didn't see
that's
it that
exactly
way.
where I am. You know, with my body weight, I don't really like how I look, you know, but I'm not fixated on that picture in my head. I'm not fixated on that number. What I'm fixated on is my behaviors. You know what I mean? Where I'm doing my training, you know, religiously.
Right.
You know, I'm not really counting macros, but I'm at least eating responsibly, you know, and I'm focusing on my health and eating healthy choices. And I feel more like a bodybuilder now than ever, really, to be honest with you.
You don't look how you look now?
Not really. You know, but I've been fixated on those pictures of what a bodybuilder should look like, you know, or the number of what a responsible bodybuilder should weigh, you know. Just put those bag of bricks down and thought more so about behaviors, you know. I need to get my training done. I got X amount of work that I need to get done. I don't need to have my carbohydrates from ice cream. I need to have my fruits and vegetables. You know, do I need to really worry about the calories? Probably not. But I need to get my fruits and vegetables, and I need to get my proteins, and I need to eat my animals. And this behaviors make me feel more like a bodybuilder now than ever. And that's been a big part of my continuum. You know, my phase.
Can I ask you, Jeff? Do you, when you're like 200 pounds, do you not like the way you look?
I don't prefer it, but I've learned to live in it.
Because you know,
it's just the way I carry my body weight. It's like all in my torso.
Oh, me too.
You know, it's all in my stomach, my chest. You know, no dude wants to have flabby chest. You know, it's not comfortable. But I'm not as insecure about it as I used to be. So, I mean, to me, it's like, if I would love to improve it so I don't get to 200 anymore. One, I'm 46. I don't want to be 200 pounds anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's not. I want to be able to play with my kids when I'm 50 years old. But I think, you know, from a bodybuilding perspective, it does make my preps a lot longer because I have to drop, you know, 30 plus pounds.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not the funnest thing in the world, but I've learned to kind of embrace it in a way that don't let it get to me so much to where it makes me not a happy person.
Okay.
And if I really think about it and I really put it, big picture perspective, if I asked 100 people at the local mall, showed them a picture of myself, hey, what do you guys think? 99 would probably say that looks fine. One would probably say, no, dude, you need to lose weight. But but for us, because we are bodybuilders and we are, our goals are extreme, and it is a sport about looks. So yeah, I mean, you're going to have some insecurity. It's normal. I think a lot of people have them.
Yeah. Like, I feel better about how I look now than I did at 138, or like 7 pounds less, like 2 years ago.
You got more muscle.
Yeah. Yeah. I got more muscle, but that took like 2 years. Yeah. I'm not like, oh, hey, check this shit out. Like, I'm not saying that, but I'm not like, again, a couple years ago, I was like, man, I don't even look like I lift.
Yeah. But I mean, when I look at it too, like the plus side of being like 30 over, I'm strong. I got leverages. Yeah. I'm moving good weight. I don't get injured as often.
Yeah.
When I'm lifting. The only downside is when I go up a couple flight of stairs, I'm breathing hard. So
yeah, that's true.
So there's some pros, there's some cons.
But that's good though, right? Like seeing that your body at any point within this like 30, 40 pound range is still useful for certain things that will make you better in your career.
True, but it's not an excuse to stay that way. And I think what Brad was saying about his behaviors.
Yeah.
There's a reason I got to 200 pounds, and it wasn't because of bad protocols. It was because of behaviors. It was choices. It comes down to the choices I was making.
Right.
Do I because all of a sudden, I went from tracking food pretty well to not tracking it. And then it went from not tracking it. Okay, I know what my 4 meals are typically are. You kind of eat the same things. Okay, I'm doing pretty good. Then it was like, oh, you know what? Let's go have pizza. Or, you know what? Let's have this cake. Or let's have these Oreo cookies in between. That shit sneaks up. Those little choices you think aren't a big deal, they compile. Then all before you know it, you're out of the good behaviors that you had. So it's easy to get out of that. And it's like you get out of that structure too. Like there's a certain structure you have, and then if you lose it, you start like being 30 over is because of the behaviors. Now I'm 30 over. I'm a little insecure about it. That brings unhappiness, and it creates kind of this vicious cycle. It's hard to get out of it. Yeah. So a lot of it,
and that affects your decision making too.
It does, because then you're making decisions based on emotions,
and fears and other unrealistic things.
Yeah, and I think like a couple of people that. When we, the goal for off season, right? With a few of my athletes, it's like, how can you, like the ultimate goal is like, how do you live your life, have a family, have a social life, without your weight, your 7-day average moving more than 2 pounds, for like a couple months. And I think it's hard. Another thing, right, that I think was hard for me was the behavior in prep of weighing every single day, and then seeing the fluctuations with what I eat every single day, and a really just that whole, we've talked about a couple times on the podcast, me not weighing myself every day was a big way to release into this new like, okay, I'm chill. Because I think people don't realize that when you have a really fed body that is actually in a good place, hormonally and all kinds of, whatever, when you have a fed body, if you eat a couple hundred extra calories or less 100 calories, like nothing really happens. Whereas when you're in prep, big swings happen with like tiny little things of food, right? And so I think I remember a lot of years when I would eat a little different and the scale would swing in one way or the other. It was always like this weird roller coaster. And now, after I went a long time of like, okay, don't weigh yourself, just chill out, or like only weigh yourself some days, like on occasion. And then like for real off season, I went through a stint. I was like, I'm going to weigh myself for a whole week, and like nothing happens. And I think when you're a really underfed, starving body, you can make crazy shit happen up or down. And so it feels like every little decision is that important. And everything does need to be that calculated because, you know, but I think when you're so far removed from what like a normal body does, you don't realize that like none of that shit really matters. If you had 4 cookies instead of 5, like you're going to be all right, or like either way, you know?
And going back to the original topic of the phases. Yeah. So basically, no, I'm not trying. I'm just saying it kind of ties in. It's like, that's two things. Your dieted body and a not dieted body.
And they
how do you know about these behaviors if you've never gone through the phases? You go through it once, it's a hell of a learning curve. You go through it twice, you get better. You go through it 3 times, then things start to become normal. Like you expect, it becomes normal. Your stress you start to understand it. Your stress levels are lower because you know what you're going through. So that's why, in my opinion, again, going back, I really believe going through the full circle 2 times around, that's when you truly start to get things. So
for context, how long is that circle? We're talking like at least a 3-year span.
2 years, 2 to 3 years. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, let's think about it. Okay, let's just say a 1 year off season, right? Before you even compete, 1 year, learn the structure, learn how to train, learn how to track, all this stuff, learn all those behaviors we've been talking about for a full year. You go into a prep. Let's just say, like nowadays, an average prep's 6 months. Let's say 5 to 6 months. So now you're talking half a year prep. Come out of that. Now you got
another 3 or 4 months to come out.
Come out, and so it's but then you have another off season, and nowadays you don't want to take a long ass prep, you know, and then if we're talking like elite level conditioning, like really lean, you don't want to get on stage the following year because now you're only gonna have 6 months of off season. You only have 6 months of another prep.
If that.
So it's like a year and a half off season and then another 6 months. So we're talking what?
3 or 4 years, yeah.
Just like Andrea said, 3 years to where you really start to figure things out.
Yeah.
If we go back to like a lot of our but our prior athletes from years ago that aren't with us anymore, a lot of them are doing really well on their own. They're coaches because they've gone through it a couple of times around.
Yeah.
So some of them have damn good physiques.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're just getting into bodybuilding or you're thinking about competing, yes, train hard, be competitive, yada, 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 but understand, like, look beyond just one show. Look
or
at,
one
like,
season or
the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's realistic. That's realistic expectations. And, of course, depending on your genetics, you know, it may be a shorter period, longer period, whatever, but just average it. I don't know, about 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. I agree.
And that probably sounds daunting to a lot of folks. 3 to 5 years to do a show, and you know, but really it's not that different than a lot of sports. You know, think about how, Andrea, before you did your first meet, how many years of gymnastics lessons did you take?
I started when I was 6. I think I competed first when I was like almost 8. But then I competed every year till I was 13 or 14. But like, for example, like right now though in grid, like I decided at the end of 2015 I wanted to do it. I'm super not good enough, and here we are, 2017. And that doesn't bother me one bit.
Skills.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me one bit.
I'm thinking of like hard sports. Like I think of like golf or tennis, where it's like really technical. Like think how long it would probably take a pro golfer to become pro. Yeah,
and I think what's different too, though, that it's not like I was 6 and I like it was like by the time I was 7, I was going like 5 days a week. Like, so it's not like it's not like it was like T-ball or whatever. It's just a different kind of animal, really. Yeah. And even then, there's levels you have to move up. It's not like I was 7 and got to compete against 18-year-olds or like that word level. Like there's 10 levels, and I was like level 4. A year at level 5, 2 years level 5, a year at level 6, a year level like you know, like it. You have to earn it, and I think that's one of the things that's almost that still like makes this problem even worse for bodybuilders is like the open class. Some people this is their 10th season. Some people it's their first, and I think we've talked about this in other podcasts, but a lot of other sports, there's like, again, T-ball under 10 years old, under 13 years old, but not in bodybuilding. It's like you just go, and that could be good or bad.
I don't think, like, I think I've mentioned it before in podcasts, I don't think it's talked about enough. Like, the expectations, I think, with people like when they first start, it's like pro cards, or they look at like these YouTube famous people and think like, okay, that's like, they think that's a real expectation right off the top. But you can almost guarantee that the people that are on that level, whether it's YouTube celebrities or pro level bodybuilders, they've gone through these circles, these phases that we're talking about.
Even if they haven't been competing a long time, they've been training a
while.
long time. Like a good example is like these guys that we hang out with a lot here, Nick and Preston Bear, and they own the supplement company BPN. And so they look incredible, and everybody freaks out when they see them. They're like, damn, they're so big, da, da, da. But they're like 23 and 27 or something like that. Like, they're not very old. But there was a picture, like a throwback picture that one of the brothers put up when they were like 13 and 16, and they had both already been lifting for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, yeah, he might be 23, but he's been lifting for 10 years,
10 years,
And these people start lifting, and 6 months later want to do a show at the age of 28. And you're like, and they're like, man, Nick's on the juice. And it's like, well, hold on though. He's done a decade, dude.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where I wish people in bodybuilding, and really I'm guilty of this too. I mean, granted, I spent 3.5 years training before I did my first show, but so many times people will put such a value on doing well and not realizing that, look, you're putting your 6 months of training, with an 18-week prep against somebody that's been training for 12, 13, years or more, and just did a 20 or 40-week prep. You're comparing apples to oranges there. You can't expect to compete on that level, just like you could not expect to play football for 14 weeks, take some speed coach lessons, and then be able to go up there and beat the Patriots,
Yeah.
That's literally what you're doing and what you're thinking that you can attain here.
Yeah.
You know what I love about this conversation is we're talking big picture. And that's just it. It's like I could go back to when I first started. I never thought big picture. I wasn't experienced enough to think big picture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just it. Gaining muscle as a natural lifter takes time. I'm still improving. I'm 46 years old and still improving. Yeah. So when someone's like early 20s just starting out and they see someone who's been training for 10 years, like, oh, that dude's juicing. It's like,
that dude's juicing.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I hate.
I'm like, I've been training for 31 years. I'm still improving. There was so much potential in that young person that's thinking that these guys may be juicing up. Well, it's like you haven't even really touched the tip of the iceberg. You haven't even come close yet to the tip of the iceberg.
And it's not even, again, it's not like when you first stepped foot in the gym. It's when you started training for hypertrophy. And I think people miss that, and I did too. Like, I grew up in gymnastics, so as a kid, I have more muscle than cheerleading, right? So I have a little more muscle than the average, like, teenager, whatever. But I started going to the gym when I was maybe like 21 to do 45 minutes of cardio like 4 days a week. Okay, but it took me like, so 21, I didn't start weight training in a semi-intelligent manner until I was like 26, but I'd gone to the gym for 5 years. But it like, not that it didn't matter at all, but like it was cardio for like a year. Okay, now I'll go do the classes, like boot camp classes for like a couple years, and I'll do a little bit of dumbbell work. And then I didn't start lifting heavy and with intention until like 2010. So I find that that's maybe it's not so common with dudes, but like with girls, I feel like that's a lot. They're like, I've been going to the gym, #fitness, da, da, da. But it's like, no, but you weren't actually doing things that make muscle, just because you were going there. Just because you were going there.
You weren't training for your sport.
Exactly.
Your sport is a physique sport where hypertrophy is necessary, and you haven't done any hypertrophy training.
Yeah.
You've done treadmilling, for a year. You've done boot camp classes for a year.
Yeah.
You decide to go ahead and do a couple CrossFit classes, but you've never trained for hypertrophy.
Right.
And that's you need to train with the intent of your sport for a good period of time.
Yeah.
So like a lot of times, like when I ask people, like when we get a Skype athlete for the first time, I'll ask, okay, how long have you been training? This question I ask, typical. They might say, well, 10 years. I go, okay, well, out of the 10, how many of it has been structured and intent on putting on muscle? Like it's well structured, and you'll get that answer like, oh, the last year or two.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm like, okay, this person's 25 years old. They've been in gym since 15, but only the last 2 years have been decently structured. So I'm like, okay, the potential there is still really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at different ages. Like I have people like in their 30s and 40s. I'm like, I know you've been going to the gym since you were 20, but you just started this. Like there's a lot we can do.
So it's like 2 years training, but and a lot of times, often it's like they're not eating enough, so they're not seeing the gains they want to see, but they want to see abs or they want to be sub 10%. And it's always that conversation of trying to talk this person out of dieting and really big picture thinking, focusing on building more of a base and allowing the weight training, like how it did for Andrea, let that create the adaptations over the next year or 2 years. Be patient and invest in your future instead of like spinning your wheels trying to diet and trying to be aesthetic if your goal is to put on muscle.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, it's like you got to think big picture and not just in this little window of like this little phase of like I need to see my abs or I need to be sub 10%.
Yeah.
So the big picture goal is to really improve your physique, put muscle on, then it's like let's put muscle on. Focus on training.
You just kind of brought another point in my mind, Jeff, when you're talking about golfers and we're talking about other athletes that makes it so much different than bodybuilding, because like you said, Andrea, because it takes so long. How many golfers that are groomed and gone through all of the ranks to become a professional, they did a lot of tournaments, and pro-ams where they could compete on that realm and that hierarchy up to becoming a pro, where now they're competing with other pros for lots of dollars. In bodybuilding, it's not realistic, at least to maximize your potential, to do a show, as often as you would do a pro-am or a tournament or, even a powerlifting meet, really.
Yeah. Even if a powerlifter competes 3 or 4 times a year, you as a bodybuilder might get like 3 or 4 over like 3 or 4 years kind of thing.
Exactly. And then those 3 or 4 will probably be grouped together in 1 or 2 months while you're in shape, know. And I think that's the hard part about it, is that you need to have that patience to know, okay, yes, this is a sport where it's not really advantageous. You've got to practice your craft, but you can't treat it like other sport where you practice your craft and then put those skills to the test as frequently as you do other.
You get more experiments, not just experience, but like actual you get to test your hypothesis a lot more often, I guess. Yeah. And also it's not because it is not a skill-based sport. Like with the golf, for example, again, if I have the time, I could hit 100 putts a day. You can only lift so much and eat so much without it backfiring. So it's because it's not just little 10 reps of a squat is different than 10 little putts on your body.
But I think it can be looked at as a skill sport, though. I mean, it's not a sport. Let's face it. In my opinion, it's not a sport. You get up there and you pose in chonies. All right, it's more of a. But I think we could look at it as a sport and treat it like a sport and learn skills, because my 10 reps of squats, I can become very technical in that. So practicing those skills in the off season, obviously you could become a better lifter prep when you're in a deficit. So learning these skills, learning how to measure food, that's a skill.
Dude, it is.
That's
People
a skill.
are bad at it. People
Learning
are
how to
bad
structure
at
your
that.
day. Okay, I'm going to set my alarm at this time, so I sure do my cardio at this time, so it doesn't impact the rest of my day, so the rest of my day isn't thrown off.
Yeah.
All this stuff is skills. It's all behaviors, and to take it lightly because it's bodybuilding.
Yeah.
You want to become
Yeah.
a good bodybuilder and become elite. If that's your goal, trust me. All the elite athletes, they in their own way are probably doing things like this in their world to make them who they are.
Yeah.
There's a reason they're up here, and it's not
Yeah.
because they're taking things lightly.
Yeah. I forget
Or
there
they're
are a
not
lot of
practicing.
things. There are a
Yeah,
lot
and
of
there-
other
and a
things
lot
we
of-
can practice. I forget.
Yeah,
Oh.
and
I don't
so
mean to
many
rip
of
your head
those-
off, Andrea.
No, that wasn't at all.
Well-
It agreed and disagreed with what I said in a couple ways, but I'll let Brad go.
Well, I was just going to say, so many of those skills that we do have to practice overlap into our lives.
Yeah.
You know, where, you know, eating is a skill, but it's a part of life. You know, eating to be an athlete, but eating's a part of life. You know,
Yeah.
getting enough rest. Getting enough rest is a big skill that you have, but it's also a part of life. And so you've got a lot of overlap there where it's a lot different than going out and practicing 100 putts a day. You know,
Yeah.
there's not as much overlap into regular life there, you know.
That's just
Yeah,
it. The sport can become very 24/7. It can be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
That's
you almost want to get to the
mean.
point where like it is, but it's not. Like it is 24/7, but it's not hard. Like you're not. At some point in my life, I had to think about it all the time, and now like it's just in the back of my head because it's yeah. But what I was gonna say
But going back to full circle, the reason you're like that now because you've gone through it.
yeah.
You'll go back to it. You'll go back to it again. There'll be those times when you're back at it again and you're like thinking about it a lot. And
But I mean, I'm never gonna unlearn what like 100 grams of apple feels like in my hand, or like you know what I mean, stuff like
And
that,
right
or
now-
what a chicken breast looks like for so many ounces. Like it's like it's so like going to a restaurant estimating macros. It's just that's a skill
that you've acquired.
Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
So
like, but all I was saying is that it's not like what to go back with Brad was saying with like the competitions. Like when we're talking experiments, like to know whether we had a good off season, we don't know for like a year. Whereas like I know the direct feedback loop of like my ball didn't go in the hole. That's what I was saying with like practicing. It's like you can't just practice a diet over and over and over to see if it works because the feedback loop is so slow.
I think when we think about in a nutshell, bodybuilding, I mean, requires
slow as shit.
Patience.
Yeah.
I mean, in every aspect of the sport, the more patience you have and the more poise you have, the better you learn, the better you become more skillful. The people that want to rush the process, I don't care what it is, bulking, dieting, your whatever, you try rushing the process, what ends up happening? Shit spirals downwards. You get everything backfires.
Yeah.
So it's hard to sell patience in the sport because people want things like right now, and it's just the more patient and more poised you are, it's just you're in a better environment for the sport.
Yeah. So do y'all think
I sound like the old guy. I always sound like the old guy.
I don't think you do. You're the experienced guy. Well, and getting to watch you guys too. Like, I mean, I'm as the youngest person, which like I'm not even that young, but I do think that one of the skills I've developed is learning from y'all's mistakes and not. I mean, mine too. But I would be stupid to not observe what happens to others and to be like, nah, that's bullshit, Jeff, even though like you're in the position you're in. Like that'd be stupid to be like, man, it's just because he is genetically blessed and like I can do it faster or something because I'm younger. Like it would just be stupid for me not to listen to any of you. And even then, right, like if I see it with my athletes, and I think I'm at an advantage too because I'm very recently out of it. So I like very, very vividly remember the things that I fucked up like 2 years ago or last year or 3 years ago or whatever. So it's just one of the reasons I love this. Because I talk about y'all all the time to my athletes, you know? and the people who ask me questions and when I'm interviewed on podcasts or, I think it's just, we talk about how slow each experiment is, and the feedback loop for us personally is incredibly slow. But if we're paying attention to enough people, then I have a lot of other little experiments that I can collect in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and you're so open-minded, Andrea, and I think that you really, really have to have an open mind when you observe those people and you observe. I mean, how many people could easily just look at Jeff and say, you know, that dude's juicing, and not know that he has done years and years and decades of training. I mean, I meet folks all the time that it would be easy to say, that person's jacked. There's no way that they're natural. Yeah. But I don't know anything about them. I just met this person. How do I know that this person's not 34 years old and done hypertrophy training since they were 10? Yeah. And never done a deficit. You know, I don't know that. And I think that's one thing with you is that when you do observe people, you keep a very open mind and you kind of know that you're seeing one little portion of a lot of context.
Yeah. And I think, too, a downfall of mine is that I'm very, like, even though, okay, maybe I've learned patience or whatever, I'm very emotional about my sports. And even with my athletes, like Jeff and I had a conversation last week where I'm very, this one particular athlete is very close to me, and I know that this certain thing we need to do is going to make her very uncomfortable, and I was too scared to do it till they were like, you need to do this for her. And I was like, like, you know? And again, it's like out of love and like I'm trying to protect this person, but so I mean, we all fuck shit. We all mess up.
Yeah.
You know? So
everybody's human. That's just it. Everybody's human.
Yeah, but that's I figured myself as an athlete, I think, way better, but I'm still have a lot to learn as a coach, and this podcast helps me. I'm glad people listen to it or whatever, but I think for people listening that do have the impatience problem, it's almost like if it takes too long for you, could you look at other people's data? I mean, how do you get exposed to more people's data? Because, like, I'm a coach, so I get to look at it all, and I work with you guys, so I get to hear it all. But if I wasn't a 3DMJ coach, do y'all have advice on, like, what you should do about that?
Mm-hmm.
I would say,
just
like,
over time also.
Often it's what our expectations are. Are they realistic or not? But, like, if we're looking, you know, let's say we're looking at someone online and like, oh, that guy's jacked, or that chick is, man, she's got a hot body, or how do I get like that? And you're expecting that to happen like that. But most guarantee that those people have stories too. Yeah. And to get to where they've gone, there was probably a journey that preluded it. And there was probably this, like what we're talking about, where they have their phases that they went around a couple times, or they had a lot of this ups and downs to figure things out. It's not like, unless they're just like, they came out the womb just genetically jacked and they don't even have to think about doing it. They're like that. But for most people, they have to work to get there, and they have to learn how they tick in their craft in order to get there. So if you're, take me back to the earlier, like I had one conversation with one guy, basically kind of looking at other people and almost putting them up on a pedestal. Mm-hmm. And like, I think it's good to learn from other people, maybe admire them, but there comes a point in time where you have to stop being an admirer and you have to take the bulls by the horn and say, you know what, I'm just as good. I'm human. They're human. I can do that too. And it's stop admiring. Like, there comes a point where you just have to just stop and say, no, I'm going to put the work in. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make the choices, the right choices, get the structure, the discipline, the follow through, and make shit happen for myself and become that, that same level or even greater. I think a lot, like even myself, like back in the day, I remember like admiring, like I remember like one year I'm like, I'm going to be like Skip LaCour. Train like him, do everything like Skip LaCour. And I was like, that didn't work. I was just like, you know what? I'm my own self. I need to create myself. I need to go after it and get it instead of looking up all the time. And I think a lot of people on social media do that far too much. They're following people. Yeah, follow, learn, but learn and then move on and realize that you can become that, if not more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because my son, he admires a lot of football players. He really admires, especially like the new guys that are coming up. He really admires like Ezekiel Elliott, and I'm like, son, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't, like you were saying, Jeff, don't necessarily admire the pictures that people put up on Instagram. Don't necessarily admire, the fact that Ezekiel, breaks an 80-yard run, and is plowing through people. Let's instead delve a little bit deeper and let's admire the work habits and the work ethic and what they had to do to get to that picture that they posted up on Instagram. And sometimes that you can't find that. You're not going to be able to find what that work ethic is. And so, I mean, it's fine to say, okay, that's pretty. Yes, that lady's got a gorgeous ass, But at the same time,
did you just say that, Brad?
I guess I did, but
okay.
More so, let's if you could, which you're probably not going to be able to. Let's find out what it took. What kind of work ethic did it take to build that gorgeous ass, to run that 80-yard run? To, what kind of I mean, I might as well. I already said it, right? And then don't be surprised if you get really let down, because once you do delve deeper. I mean, I had a best friend one time that was admiring a guy's physique, and he went a little bit deeper, and he was admiring his work ethic, and he went a little bit deeper, and guess what? Dude's on roids, and his bubble was shattered.
Yeah.
And you got to kind of, Andrea, to kind of answer your question. You got to have an open mind, but don't just look at the surface. You got to really look at, like I love Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt's like the fastest man on the earth, but I don't admire him because he's the fastest man on earth. I admire him because dude was doing the work when he didn't feel like it. When he was. That's what I admire about Usain Bolt.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just say there's a reason why he is who he is, and it's not just because he just came out the womb. Now I'm the fastest on the planet. He had to work for it. Yeah, there's probably some genetics involved, but he still had to work.
I think one of my innate advantages too, now I think about it, is that I, by personality, don't like shallow. I dive into like everything. And so I think a lot of people, especially like in America in this day and age with their phones or whatever, it's like a tweet, an Instagram post, a Facebook post, whatever, they are only so long and there's only so much you can say in them. But I've always been the type of person that's interested in but I want a documentary or like a 3-hour movie or a 10-hour book or whatever. So I think, and I've always been like that. And so I think that is, when I was saying my advantage is I get to be with you guys all the time. Yeah, but I also know y'all's stories really well. People say it about Matt all the time, but I've lived with Matt. I know what he does every day. People say it about Nick and Preston, but it's like, I see them train, so I think it's just, if you're someone who is always looking at people above you and you're like, oh, dang, look at them. It's like, maybe you do go search like their biography or reach out to them privately via email or try to find a day in the life that's not just a 10-minute YouTube video, but like maybe there's a big blog post there or something. But I would maybe think that is a big thing that people miss in this day and age of like snippets is like, but the whole story. And I've always appreciated the whole story. So I think maybe that's something that's been to my advantage too, I guess.
Yeah.
Damn it. What are we talking about? Continue.
talking about the continuum. The continuum.
Okay. So we talked a lot about beginner, like your first 2 cycles, right? That there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's
not
just
the cycles that people might think we're talking. We're not talking about steroid cycles.
Right.
We're talking about
full prep, gain should be the first part. It shouldn't be like cut then gain, right? Gain, cut, gain, cut, gain. So it's like it's a W. Okay. Right? Gain, cut, gain. We should trademark that. The 3DMJ
W start with a downward.
But it starts high. It
Not
looks
if it's
like
cursive.
this.
Cursive,
That's
it starts
true.
goes up.
Not if it's a
and-
capital cursive. Why y'all trying to do this to me?
Gain, cut, gain, cut. Yeah, it's
It starts up top. There's 3 tops and 2 little bottoms. It's the 3D
going through 2 phases, gaining and cutting. Like, I hate that's, and we're not talking like 8-week gain, 8-week cut. We're talking like in general,
Years.
like long,
Yeah.
like let's just say 6 to like a gaining 6 to 12, like a year, at least a year. Like if you're new, at least a year of just
Lifting.
weight training, no
Eating.
deficits, eat.
Yeah.
A year, and then 6 months of a prep, and then we're talking bodybuilding. 6-month prep, 1.5 to 2 year off season, another prep. So it's like a 3 to 5, like we talked about, 3 to 5 years process. Going through this phase, complete phase, not cycle. We don't want to say cycle. Complete phase.
Okay.
Twice.
Yeah.
Phases.
Well, and two, take it into context. Is my best look, in my opinion, was when I took a 3-year off season.
Yeah.
Why? I'm not very genetically blessed when it comes to a nice, pretty physique.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got some muscle. Yes, I'm strong. Yes, I can get shredded, but I don't have a real pretty physique. And in order to make improvements, I need a little bit longer time. Others that, can stay lean and live lean and maybe have a little bit more sensitivity to weight training, and they can put on a little bit more muscle and less of a surplus, maybe they can get away with 18 months or 2 years or whatever. But I think that's a big portion of that is kind of knowing thyself.
Yeah. And I think too, like someone's going to bring up like, what about mini cuts? What about, I think that's maybe a little later. And leave that up to a coach. I would think if you're not doing that guided, like the way Berta does, like a diet before the diet, very strategic. It's still kind of a part of a prep.
If you're doing a weight training, it's your first year. I don't think you should be stressing on many. I mean, unless you're just like really overweight.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be stressing out. I mean, that's time away from the big picture. You're trying to build a foundation. You're going to spend 2, 3, 4 months dieting.
Yeah.
Save it for later on.
And most of the time, when people want a mini cut, it's because they just got fat. They got fat, too fat. And it's all you're making decisions based on bad, probably behaviors that got you to where you're at now, and so now you got to clean up your mess. That's a different story.
I mean, mini cut. Yeah, I mean, the plus side to it, you do start to learn like how to be in a deficit, how to live in a deficit. So you do pick up some skills there that you can carry over to a prep. But in your first year of bodybuilding, I think you can save that for later.
Yeah.
To be honest.
That's what I'm saying is like people are going to be like, well, what about mini cuts? And we talked about this little pattern or whatever of phases, but that's one of the things that you might have the luxury of doing later once you've passed this phase, wouldn't y'all say? Like there's a lot of things that you can play around with later because the consequences are much lower. Like damn well how to diet. Like if you dieted for 4 weeks in the middle of off season, Jeff, it'd be nothing. But if like someone, I mean, it would be even like
let's say
Bert does it, loses 10 pounds, like cool, but it doesn't affect him psychologically. It doesn't affect his training. It does like it's nothing. Whereas if you try to diet for a month pretty aggressively in your first off season, it could be a little tricky.
Yeah. Let's say you've been training a few years, you have a good foundation of muscle. Your goal is not to get on stage, but you want to change your body count. Then you can say, okay, let me have these like 6 to 9 months of building some muscle, maybe 3 months. You're just like, okay, let me clean some of this up, and then get right back into more gaining. Slowly, like let's say, but going through that, let's say 2 or 3 cycles. When I said cycle again that night. But let's say 2 to 3 year process. If you do that, then slowly over those 3 years, no doubt you're going to change your body composition in a favorable way.
Right.
To where you're a little bit leaner than you used to be 3 years prior, and you're more muscular, and you have a better physique.
Yeah.
But if we're talking, you're going to get on a bodybuilding stage. That's like a totally different conversation.
Yeah.
Does that make? I mean, to me, that's how I would vision like running like mini cuts if you are not looking to compete, but to improve your body comp over. And don't look at it like, okay, I'm gonna cut for 6 weeks and I'm gonna gain for 8 weeks. It's like they need to be like longer stretch, and look at it from a 2 or 3 year perspective instead of a short little window.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people do when they think mini cutting and bulking, is that they just look at these short little windows instead of stretching it out over 2 or 3 years. Because we all know gaining muscle takes time.
Yeah.
And getting lean, it's a skill. And each time you do a mini cut, you get better and better at it. So to me, it's like, be patient with it. 2 to 3 years later, you'll have a better physique.
Boom, shakalaka.
And you'll keep your shit too.
Yeah.
Your mental shit you'll be a lot healthier mentally and emotionally because you're more patient with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's, unfortunately, still so many people see what should be our sport as a body transformation fix. Still, you know, and it's sad, man. It makes me real sad.
And it's funny too. Yeah, and it's funny because I kind of get sometimes blinders on, and we're dealing with our folks who have researched us and have come to us. And, you know, every now and then we get that one person that is a representation of a lot of people out there that have that 12-week, 18-week body transformation mindset. Oh, well, these 3D guys are supposed to be really good at that. I'm going to go ahead and go with them, you know. And then it's an eye-opener. You realize, oh, wow. You know, we've got a very, very, very small population of the fitness.
A small population of 3D MJers, yeah, but the general fitness, it's like the sport is just like the before and after 12-week pictures on the IGs. I'm just like, no, why?
Yeah.
And I don't know how to combat that, but that is definitely although social media and Instagram and all those whatevers are great in a lot of ways, that's one of the biggest ones that I guess as a bodybuilding coach I get so sad about, is that they think that's what this sport is for. Or like, I'm sure they don't think that's what it's for, but they couldn't do it on their own, and so they want a coach to get on stage because it'll fix them. And it's just sad.
What's sad and frustrating, you know, like, you don't get to see like the 12-week transformation. You don't get to see what the next 12 weeks look like or the next 6 months look like.
Yeah.
So I can almost guarantee, like, the majority of these that you've probably seen on Instagram, that's like everything that we talk about in our approach, it's probably opposite. It's almost like the things that we try to coach, they're left to the wolves, basically.
Yeah.
So it's like you're basically for 12 weeks, you're, in a nutshell, probably starved and pushed so damn hard to make yourself look that way. What happens when the handcuffs come off?
Yeah,
you're like blood in the water for a shark.
Yeah.
Lose your mind.
So anyways, I think we did a good job.
Wrap this up? Yeah.
I think we did a good job. You can recap it. Do you want to, Jeff or Brad? Who's first?
I'll let Jeff go first because usually he prompts a lot of thoughts in my brain.
So I think recapping, in a nutshell, the big picture message would be patience. Like, really embrace patience, and that in order to be a good bodybuilder, or whatever category you're in competitively on the stage, that look at it as a 3 to 5 year process as opposed to the small window of like, this show that I'm doing now, this is where I'm going to be good or not. Because think of it more as a career as opposed to just like this little short, little tight window. So patience, go through the process 2 to 3 times, then you start to really learn more about yourself. Protocol wise, you learn how to manipulate the protocols. You also learn the behaviors. You improve on your behaviors and structure as you move along. That's how you become better.
I like it. Go, Brian.
Yeah, and I guess just to expand on that is, as you're learning all those behaviors and you're learning that structure and you're learning how to train, you're going to be gaining that all invaluable muscle, which is what it's all about when you're out there and I don't care if it's a bodybuilding stage, a bikini, physique, figure. You got to have muscle, and you're not going to do that in a 12, 18-week body transformation. It's going to take these years and years of processes. That is all going to be you developing your craft and developing all those skills that Jeff talked about. You're going to be gaining all that muscle that you're going to need
And I think along the way too, within all what we're talking about, as you're going through it, still take it serious, still be competitive, still have fun with it all. Because if you forget all that while you're going through it, then what the hell we're doing it? Why are we doing this if we're not going to have fun through it?
Right.
So you have to keep that in perspective too. Don't just look, okay, these guys are telling me 3 to 5 years. That's forever. No, you still have to enjoy what you're doing now. You look at a kid who's playing Pop Warner football. They want to get to the Super Bowl one day. They're still having fun playing their Pop Warner games.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my son's digging his training. He's loving his training. So
yeah,
that's all part of that fun.
And I think too, if you're not happy until you have that end goal and you don't have patience, and 3 to 5 years sounds too long, then I wouldn't do the sport. Because to us, that's a drop in the bucket, right? When you hear 3 to 5 years, you're like, okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
or at least find something else to be your focus. Like, shoot, I don't know if you can do a different sport where you could train in and develop muscle, and I don't know. I'm not really sure. There's gotta be
if
other
you don't
ways
love training, though, this thing's going to be a prison for like,
Right?
Yeah. So if you go to the gym reluctantly with the goal of like, but my body will look different. I don't think there's faster ways of looking different. There are than investing 3 to 5 years. Maybe you want to invest a few $1,000s in some surgery. Like, I don't know, but or maybe, you do just want to do I don't know. I don't even want to go about like what else you could do, but to do this well and have the career like you guys, you have to love it. We can talk about how to love it in a different podcast, but I think we did a good job summarizing how important the patience and the W. I want to call it a W real bad, y'all.
If you want to call it W, go for it.
Yes.
But when this podcast is over, I'm going to go practice my skill of bringing my fork up to my mouth.
With proper
hitting
form.
My lips. So I'm gonna improve my eating skills.
See, that's what it's all about. Tiny victories.
Word.
Okay, we'll see y'all next week.
Hey everybody, it's Eric Helms. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. As you know, at 3DMJ we promote evidence-based approaches to the lifting community. If that's something you want to dive deeper into, I'd encourage you to check out my research review, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, or for short, MASS. This is a review that myself, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Greg Knuckles put out every month. We cover the latest research publications that are applicable to strength and physique athletes, or anyone who's looking to get stronger or improve their body comp. Our content is in both written and video format. For more information on how to subscribe, check out 3dmusclejourney.com/mass. That's 3dmusclejourney.com/MASS for further details. Thanks for tuning in.